Hi, welcome. Shout out to Mia. Thank you for joining. Shout out to Harry. Welcome everyone. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Thank you for being here. Oh, thank you, Mia. Thank you for joining. Shout out to Gio. Shout out to Zach. Shout out to Rylan. Shout out to Winter. Shout out to Gabby. Shout out to Zaviana. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Elton. Write your name again if I haven't gotten to you. Shout out to Maria. Shout out to Annie. Shout out to Mel. Shout out to Manaya. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Kaya. Or Kaya. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Cedra. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Shanzi. Shanzi. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Allison. Shout out to Caitlin. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Lulu. Shout out to Alexander. Shout out to Aya. Shout out to Mirab. Shout out to Justin. Thank you. Have a great day as well. Thank you so much. Shout out to Myra. Write your name again. Oh no, I spelled that wrong. Give me 1 second. Shout out to Mariah. Mariah. Sorry if I misspelled your name or mispronounced your name. Shout out to Poppy. Write your name again if I haven't gotten to you. Shout out to Diara. Shout out to Daniela. Shout out to Isla. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Marisol. Shout out to Audrey. Shout out to Hanya. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Paula. Shout out to Ada. Or Ida. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Allie. Shout out to Mariana. Shout out to Caitlin. Shout out to Michael. Shout out to Gabby. Shout out to Andy. Shout out to Asma. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Isaiah. Shout out to Lisa. Shout out to Megan. Shout out to what was it? Oh, I missed it. Shout out to Yolanda. Shout out to Melanie. Shout out to Mesa. Shout out to Mathila. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Chloe. Shout out to Xander. Shout out to Marvin. Shout out to Diane Lee. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Sarah. Shout out to Denisa. Shout out to Yossi. Shout out to Jupiter. Shout out to Alloy. Shout out to Amara. Shout out to Story. Shout out to Riley. Shout out to Sage. Shout out to Norina. Shout out to Angelica. Shout out to Tate. Shout out to Nola. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Bagaya. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Morgan, I got you. Shout out to Mila. Shout out to Haven. Shout out to Allie. Shout out to Alexa. Shout out to Christina. Shout out to Tiffany. Shout out to Jenny. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Thank you for being here. Shout out to Yarelis. Shout out to Lillian. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Kayeli. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Arby. Shout out to Malaya. Shout out to Mila. Shout out to Grace. Shout out to Sadie. Shout out to Queenie. Shout out to Alessa. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Cleo. Shout out to Layla. Shout out to Shelly. Shout out to Angelina. Shout out to Camila. Shout out to Julian. Shout out to Nayeli. Shout out to Julian. Shout out to Veronica. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Lacey. Shout out to Trixie. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to these people. Leave a like if you're enjoying the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. Cleo, I got you right here. On to the next page. Write your name in the chat if I haven't gotten to you. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out to Penny. Shout out to Carl. Shout out to Nixie. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Aurora. Shout out to Vivian. Shout out to Haven. Shout out to Rosie. Shout out to Mana. Shout out to Sebastian. Shout out to Kay. Shout out to Amaya. Shout out to Lindsay. Shout out to Val. Shout out to Jaden. Shout out to Amanda. Shout out to Ray Ray. Shout out to Yadira. Shout out to Annika. Shout out to Madeline. Shout out to Narissa, or Narissa, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Brianna. Shout out to Kira. Shout out to Zoe. Shout out to Brinley. Write your name again if I haven't gotten to you. Thank you so much for your patience. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Amelia. Shout out to Kyle. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Bella. Shout out to Kishelle. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Rosella. Shout out to Ari. Shout out to Rumi. Shout out to Avery. Shout out to Jocelyn. Shout out to Rochelle. Shout out to Summer. Shout out to Veda. Shout out to Audrey. Shout out to Namira. Shout out to Jael. Shout out to Rosie. Shout out to Lila. Shout out to Jasmine. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Andrea. Shout out to Layla. Shout out to Winter. Shout out to Aziza. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Koraya, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Kyla, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Marija, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Malek, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Name, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Mille, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Chip, thank you for your support. I truly appreciate it. Shout out to Inessa. Shout out to Maya. Shout out to Winter. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Sophie. Shout out to Malia. Shout out to Lisa. Shout out to Skylar. Shout out to Jeremiah. Shout out to Wid. Shout out to Julia. Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to Eliza. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Luciana. Shout out to Amir. Shout out to Serenity. Shout out to Bentley. Shout out to Ardis and Reed. Shout out to Emmy. Shout out to Santino. Shout out to Emmy. Shout out to Katie. Shout out to Esme. Shout out to Aisha. Shout out to Lucy. Shout out to Melly. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Hessa. Shout out to Scarlett. Shout out to Nicola. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Ava. Anais. Shout out to Mira. Shout out to Camila. Shout out to Sky. Shout out to Mariah. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Cash. Shout out to Everly. Shout out to Ashlyn. Whoops. Shout out to Sally. Shout out to Connor. Shout out to Fiona. Shout out to Jennifer. Shout out to Corey. Shout out to Asher. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Thank you for being here. Shout out to Elliot. Shout out to Gemma. Whoops. Shout out to Bahar. Shout out to Elizabeth. Shout out to Ashley. Shout out to Grace. Shout out to Ruby. Shout out to Gia. Shout out to Miracle. Shout out to Jessica. Shout out to Amna. Shout out to Anna. Shout out to oh, I missed it. Kaylee. Shout out to Presley. Shout out to Angel. Shout out to Sapphira. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Ahmed. Shout out to Haura. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Ash. Shout out to Summer. Shout out to Hanya. Shout out to Amna, I got you. Shout out to Millie. Shout out to Elena. Shout out to Cassandra. Shout out to Cara. to Sonia. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Evelyn. Shout out to Ethan. Shout out to Clara. Shout out to Rylan. Shout out to Cadence. Shout out to Ray. Shout out to Maham. Shout out to, is it Yaya? Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Abby. Shout out to Chloe. Shout out to Kerbu. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Kiki. Shout out to Elena. Shout out to Danaya. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Adeline. Shout out to Elena, I got you. Shout out to Zaina. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Blade. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Noah. Shout out to Serene. Shout out to Adriana. Shout out to Regina. Shout out to Katie. Shout out to Awash. Shout out to Piper. Shout out to Kimberly. Shout out to Mina. Shout out to Avery. Shout out to Yasmin. Whoops. Shout out to, I'm gonna write it again because I messed up the S. Shout out to Yasmin. There we go. Shout out to Pavlina. Shout out to Serena. Shout out to Jazzy. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Molly. Shout out to Beatrice. Shout out to Olive. Shout out to Kaylani. Shout out to Nev. Shout out to Paige. Shout out to Marcia. Or Marcia. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Jessica. Shout out to Kate. Shout out to Hanny. Shout out to Jolene. Shout out to Shirley. Shout out to Athena. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Amali. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Miguel. Shout out to Miso. Shout out to Rapol. Shout out to Kapu. Shout out to Carrie. Shout out to Allie. Shout out to Reagan. Shout out to Chance. Shout out to Renesmee. Shout out to Phoebe. Shout out to Leah. Shout out to Marina. Shout out to Catherine. Shout out to Max. Shout out to Aaliyah. Shout out to Maram. Shout out to Carly. Shout out to Remy. Shout out to, is it Matha? Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Mitha. Shout out to Moses. Shout out to Samir. Shout out to Amber. Shout out to May. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Excuse me. Thank you for being here. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Kennedy. Shout out to Vivian. Shout out to Harper. Shout out to Noelle. Excuse me. Shout out to Mina. Shout out to Macy. Shout out to Mohammed. Shout out to Lennon. Shout out to Sadie. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Rodney. Shout out to Sharon. Shout out to Dakota. Shout out to Catherine. Shout out to Leona. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Jory. Shout out to Chloe. Booth. Shout out to Shirley. Shout out to Masa or Mesa. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Kaylani. Shout out to Kimberly. Shout out to Amy. Shout out to Ellie. Shout out to Adley. Shout out to Liam. Shout out to Lucia. Shout out to Maddie. Shout out to Kalia. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Zavaki. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Isla. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Carla. Shout out to Caitlin. Shout out to Julie. Shout out to Riley. Shout out to Jeremiah. Shout out to Leah. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Kaylee. Shout out to Gigi. Shout out to Mackenzie. Shout out to Summer. Shout out to Sophie. Shout out to Oliver. Shout out to Alani. Shout out to Jessa. Shout out to Catalina. Shout out to Becca. Shout out to Connor. Shout out to Peotone. Sorry if I mispronounce her name. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Logan. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Chelsea. Shout out to Adam. Shout out to Tiffany. Shout out to Naira. Shout out to Chloe. Shout out to Brianna. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Carol. Shout out to Tamzin. Shout out to Amarion. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Jenna. Shout out to Rhea. Shout out to Skies. Shout out to Annabelle. Shout out to Munisa. Shout out to Kyle. Shout out to Sabrina. Shout out to Brandon. Shout out to Holly. Shout out to Farah. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Aliam. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Soon Min. Happy birthday. Shout out to Macy. Wow. Shout out to Jethro. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Allie. Shout out to Shaylee. Shout out to Eli. Shout out to Nala. Shout out to Kath. Shout out to Peyton. Shout out to Esme. Shout out to Nico. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Lexi. Shout out to Leah. Shout out to Zuza. Shout out to Sky Blue. Shout out to Jason. Shout out to Harlow. Shout out to Nord. Shout out to Gabby. Shout out to Lynn. Shout out to Brielle. Shout out to Elisa. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Arlene. Shout out to Gabriel. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Thank you for being here. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Oh, there we go. This marker's running out. Shout out to Hank. Shout out to Camrea. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm so sorry. Shout out to Presley. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Jane. Shout out to Eduardo. Shout out to Jacqueline. Shout out to Success. Shout out to Nafisa. Shout out to Penelope. Shout out to Ives. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Rena. Shout out to Maham. Shout out to Shakina. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Case. Shout out to Liam. Shout out to Bianca. Shout out to Teresa. Shout out to Belle. Shout out to Paula. Oh no, how do you spell Paula? Shout out to Finn. Shout out to Amari. Shout out to Peyton. Shout out to Jasmine. Shout out to Olive. Leave a like if you're enjoying the live stream. Shout out to Raylan. Or Rylan, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Paula. Shout out to Logan. Shout out to Lillian. Shout out to Arslan. Shout out to Micah. Shout out to Najina. Shout out to Maddie. Shout out to Wendy. Shout out to Mila. Shout out to Ivan. Shout out to Rory. Shout out to Lena. Shout out to Beyonce. Shout out to Noah. Shout out to April. Shout out to Esther. Shout out to Laskia. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Laskaya. Shout out to Kinsley. Shout out to Antonella. Shout out to Elaine. Shout out to Catalia. Shout out to Jordan. Shout out to Hope. Shout out to Layla. Shout out to Molly. Shout out to Charlie. Shout out to Jaden. Shout out to Amelia. Shout out to Thiago. Shout out to Brittany. Shout out to Victoria. Shout out to Brody. Shout out to Masa. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Davina. Shout out to Jameson. Shout out to Riley. Shout out to Marty. Shout out to Thomas. Shout out to Celia. Oh, what was it? Celia. Oops, I messed up. Shout out to Linda. Shout out to Zayden. Shout out to Samari. Shout out to Jacob. Shout out to Manisa. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Patrick. Shout out to Natalie. Shout out to Sandy. Shout out to Rebecca. Shout out to Chandler. Shout out to Aaliyah. Shout out to Paris. Shout out to Jonah. Shout out to Jake. Shout out to Mark. Shout out to Sveva. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Excuse me. Shout out to Jay Kaiden. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Shout out to Lyndon. Shout out to Shelly. Shout out to Cricket. Shout out to Carol. Shout out to Coco. Shout out to Daisy. Shout out to Lexi. Shout out to Fatima. Shout out to Bailey. Shout out to Success. Shout out to Timon. Shout out to Stella. Leave a like if you're enjoying the live stream. Shout out to Kayla. Shout out to Miles. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Kylan. Shout out to Kosova. Shout out to these people. Leave a like if you enjoyed the live stream. Thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe. I will be live streaming again today. So subscribe if you want to know when I'm gonna go live again. Thank you so much for being here. Take care. I will see you soon. Bye.